Hey guys, it's Penelope in London. I wanted to focus today on the idea that we have Saturn moving into Aries. And what I wanted to do was show you, I'm just bringing up the chart properly. What I wanted to do is just show you where Saturn is right now. It's at the 29th degree. So if we go with my pointer, you can see that Saturn is at the 29th degree. And we know that it's going to hit Neptune exact at 0045. You see it says 16 there when it's 45 and 0045. That's the February the 20th, 2026. So looking at Saturn, I was reading up Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil by Liz Green, and I was examining the Saturn in Aries because that would have happened about 29, 30 years ago. 1989, I believe, that I recall without looking. So Saturn and Neptune, Uranus and Pluto. We've got so Saturn, Neptune, Pluto up here, which is in a sextile, and we've got Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus down here. So in effect, we do have a good connection with these planets in the sextile. And Saturn, when we look at what that's about, Saturn is about our responsibility and personal worth. I just had my second Saturn return when the last hit, when Saturn was at 27 degrees of Pisces. So it's moving out of Pisces. So I'm really grateful for that as well, because it's been really trying, but a lot of development for me over the last couple of years as it's been swinging backwards and forwards over my personal Saturn in my fourth house. So Saturn is the development of personal worth, and it teaches us that reward is the direct result of personal effort and responsibility. So the efforts we put in, we gain, what we reap, what we sow, we reap. And Saturn is where we face our own reality. So it can seem like we're being pushed, and we feel like we're a bit restricted. But Saturn is where we also accept our burdens of duty. Like, I know I've got to do this if I want to get that. It's not about punishment. It's the price of becoming capable. If you look back on your life, like if I go back 30 years to my first Saturn return, what I've achieved and what I've become is in alignment with, it didn't happen overnight. You just keep going forward, and then you gain knowledge and wisdom along the way. And Saturn, to me, is a bit like the old crone in mythology, that the wisdom is there, but it comes to us, to our consciousness, when we're ready for it, when we've learnt what we need to learn. I don't believe in learning lessons as such, and particularly when people have been through trauma and people call them lessons. I think that we're living life and that stuff happens and we figure things out as we go. But looking at our charts can really help us to understand our own psychology, and that's why I love astrology. So the price of becoming capable, Saturn. And its judgment here is not moral, it's not like moral judgment, it's by our experience, refined by our experience. And Saturn defines the fear of the unknown. So whatever house it's in, there can be a sense of the fear of the unknown. Through my fourth house, it was the place I was living at, the childhood trauma that I experienced, and looking at all of these different areas. And it's also where we can have hesitation, which blocks our process. So we can feel like, we want to make progress in a particular way, but it just isn't happening, or it feels like hard work. And the point is that we don't want to be in a situation where we're giving up, which is interesting. When this conjunction happens, this is what this is about. You'll see as I go on through this video. So for me, this video really is, while I'm mentioning the other planets, it's more Saturn orientated for me. So Saturn is clearer about, that once our confidence is regained, we become confident. We go, oh no, I can't do this, and oh, I need to do this. And then we sort of come to a conclusion as we start moving forward that growth, becomes inevitable, that we have to make changes. And also objectives that once existed only as potential can then be realized. So we think, we want to do something and it's not happening. And then when we begin to make choices, it's about choices in life. This is what we've got to realize. Even when we look at a chart, it's not defined in or set in stone. It's like we do have choices. I do think that we have a certain amount of free will. We're humans, so the free will is not extended to every area of our lives. We're born and then we leave this earth at some point. So we have no free will over that, as an example. So Saturn grants freedom, and it's not by removing limits, but teaching us how to work with them. And it allows us to establish priorities, allowing efficient management of personal resources to plan and achieve our goals. If you look back on your life, you may see where you've taken dips or losses, and then you've gained things back and you've got more wisdom. When Saturn, right, when it functions in a negative way, it can show up as pessimism and defeat, and it's when our hope is dimmed. And depending on what Saturn is doing to our own personal chart, our natal chart, and then the transits, we can begin to sort of guide ourselves of where we may need help. So, for instance, if we had Saturn conjunct Moon, we may struggle, or Saturn conjunct Venus, our natal Venus, we're going to be struggling in a different way. But then we may have a Saturn conjunct Venus, but at the same time, that Venus may have good aspects, our natal aspects. So it's not all one way, it's very individual. So we do need to know that we may become exhausted when it's a tough transit, but we know that we can work on it if we look at what that planet is doing. So self-discipline is something that is essential, and that can, again, take time. Saturn reminds us that alignment with the laws of nature, if we align with the laws of nature, that gives us advantage over ignoring the laws of nature. If you throw a ball up in the air, it's going to come down. So if you leave a bath tap running, it's going to overflow. So the laws of nature it's like being aware of the laws of nature, even with our finances, the Saturn Capricorn, our work and such like. So Saturn is wisdom. And this is the beautiful thing about Saturn, and why I mentioned the crone, which I'll do another video on in the coming weeks, because I've been looking at that from a mythological point of view in the Inner World of Trauma by Donald Kalshed, which is other work that I do. So then if we look at Uranus, which is here, okay, you can see that it's going to be in a sextile to Neptune and Saturn. So Uranus is individual need to be free from bonds and responsibility. And it also is where we have the opportunity to fulfill our own destiny. So for me, I feel quite grateful that I've got my sun that just is at 0 degrees in my 7th house and in Gemini. So Uranus is hitting my sun. So my chart is really interesting for me at this time, but I have had a lot of hardships in my life, as many of us have had. So, I feel like I understand more of what is being asked of me and what's expected of me, and it's in alignment with where I'm heading. So it insists that we must have the opportunity to fill our own destiny. So Uranus is about that. And if we refuse to choose the path that our soul is desiring, then it can make things more tricky for us. And Uranus is beyond physical boundaries. It's, the octave of also Mercury, and it's the mind, it's the inner spirit. So where we can find comfort or we find discomfort. And traditionally, and convention, if things are over conventionality, we can reject what we see as traditional. You've got to do this. It's not about rebellion. So it's not about rebelling or just out of rebellion. It can be, where we have a need to fully express our own individuality. So it functions when we can operate, it functions best when we operate fairly and honestly. In personal life, Uranus manifests as a higher sort of level of originality. And it's also negatively, I don't like the word negatively, but as an example, Uranus can become anarchy, fanaticism, eccentricity, and displays of power. If we use it in a positive way, then Uranus expresses spiritual concern that society enjoy freedom from ignorance. And then we have Neptune, which is about the dreams here. Neptune is about our dreams. And it's also is the dynamic which we have social obligations. It's also a response to obscure, where we can feel obscured. There can be a sense of guilt or spiritual duty. So we may feel that, which is human and very needed in society, the need to serve society also, because we can't go around aimlessly, seeking relief from anxiety. We have to deal with those things in ourselves. Neptune is where we have extreme sensitivity as well. And it's the unconscious sympathy, empathy, aesthetic appreciation, utopia, rhythm, illusion, and poetry. And it's also music, imagination. So when Saturn meets here, this is a great time for artists. And when we use this at its higher octave, Neptune motivates compensation for decaying human conditions. It brings order to chaos, inspires service towards the marginalized, and also those who are criminalized or, mentally or emotionally challenged, because this happens in society and we all go through those things. I had a meltdown in 2016, 17, and, I needed help then. And we go through points in our lives where we are going to need help. And each of us will experience that at points throughout our lives. So Neptune connects deeply with our collective feelings, and it is the feminine principle, which is really quite beautiful. And it's also the oceans, and it's the depths of the oceans and outer space. So we've created through our imagination over the last few hundred years, if we just go back a few hundred years, the things we created are being quite amazing, and they have come through imagination. Aeroplanes, high-rise buildings in the sense of beauty, and all of the cathedrals in the world, and the stunning things that humans have created through the imagination. But we must remember that, we don't want to go into too much fantasy, because it can actually cause more struggle. So, for instance, if we live in fantasy land and we're doing drugs and alcohol and we're not, focusing on certain realities of life, then it can be problematic. So this is about creation and not limitation or imitation. The Pluto, which, that was a big thing before it moved out of Capricorn, but people are not really talking about Pluto as much at this time, but it's very involved in this aspect because it's 0-3, and as we go forward, you can see at 0-3 degrees, 3 degrees, and that is playing out, which is very good for the collective in my view. So Pluto is the urge to sacrifice ourselves to the demands of the social structure, and also to use every available resource to shape its evolution. So Pluto brings political, religious, and sociology into the scheme and upheaval, forcing society to re-examine the values that once sustained it. And positively, Pluto removes parasitic influences that would destroy creativity. So this is very good. It's on a negative or lower octave, it becomes a festering malignancy, reducing humanity to baseline instincts and like predators, like what we're seeing with the Epstein files at the moment, that predator type behavior that goes on. And I will also add that predator type behavior that's going on at the top, that we're seeing all of these things come out now. The veil is being lifted, but we're going in for different structure here. the idea of, illusion and being lost in illusion and feeling that we have no power. With the Neptune Saturn, we're going into a whole new way of dealing with these things. It's like we are waking up, it's not okay. And the Epstein thing being ignored by governments and people not being dealt with appropriately, or it's just going over the surface, really bothers me. And even at the root level, CSA, child abuse, it's a terrible situation that's going on, where we have 1 in 4 girls, and the figures are 1 in 20 boys this happens to, but I think that figure is much lower than it should be said, because I actually think there's more. What I'm trying to say, I think there's a lot more young males who've been through this, or adult males who have really not disclosed. And I needed to bring this up today because I've been watching what's going on, and I do work in that field in a trauma clinic where people have had CSA in childhood. And I find that seeing what's going on, it bugs me very much, because we need to remember this is not just at the top of the hierarchy, it's also happens in household homes. And the numbers are just really tragic. And I'm hoping as a society, the more realism we get to, and looking at these things, that we, maybe in 100 or 200 years, that type of trauma will not be at the top of the list, because it is currently. So that was positively. Pluto removes parasitic influences that destroy creativity, because when people do go through such traumas, a lot of creativity in their childhoods are destroyed. But saying that from the other perspective, a lot of people that have been through horrific traumas also become great artists, or are able to express themselves in ways that they wouldn't have been able to. It's like a double-edged sword, as we know. So Saturn conjunct Neptune, it's practical dreams and inner strengths. So Saturn conjunct Neptune, deception no longer will work, right? We can't be deceived anymore. And also to the point we cannot deceive ourselves. We will have a feeling of natural distrust, even with ourselves. We may think, can I achieve this dream? And also shaped by the recent social events, and dogma will not be accepted, unless it's logically verified that something is, like that Neptunian, is this being, in alignment with the dreams of humanity? Where do we want to go? And Saturn will help us restructure these hierarchies that have been abusive. So we will have heightened intuition with this as well, which is wonderful. So we can use that well. It's like follow your gut instinct, particularly with that Uranian energy tied in there. We may surprise ourselves with some of our great thoughts. And in Gemini, when it moves into Gemini I think it's in end of April, we're going to have a whole different system going on with our communication, which we can currently see with ChatGPT and all of these other things that are coming into our awareness. We need to avoid anything with this conjunction. We will need to avoid anything artificial, that's substances or stimulants that are unfamiliar to our bodies, because it could slow down our progress, and we don't want that. We want to use this to our advantage. And the Saturn return is around age 30, 60 and 90. There are milestones of maturing and helping us to see our foundations, like what's here, what can I do? Where can I go ahead? So again, Saturn, Neptune is wonderful. Liz Green, I've got her book, Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. And she says Saturn in Aries may involve sacrifice, and Neptune adds dreams and uncertainty. Saturn ensures we don't receive rewards passively, and we must work for them. And it's not just going to drop into our hands. So, and in that effort lies the real value, the gold, And this conjunction encourages engagement with life. So we have to engage. It's not a time to withdraw. It's about our confidence, which we will build up as we are working with others and offering our unique gifts to the world. And even mundane acts can profoundly impact others. So our main mundane acts, like people who take food to people, people who care for people, bringing freedom to people by helping other people, Neptune, but also giving other people structure as well, as can be very helpful. There's many ways that can play out. So Saturn and Neptune is about the artist. Saturn Neptune is crucial for artists. It allows the freedom to channel the work, collective feeling into creative work. And while I believe we are all artists, it's not that not everybody's an artist in the same way. Like for some people, it could be they have, food. It could be creativity in any way that we have. We've all got the creative spark. So the energy can also be expressed, in relationship. We may have like, to be creative with our relationships, to be creative with where we live, to be creative in our work, whatever that may be. So we need a balance because this is about collective feelings with Neptune, and we don't want to overwhelm ourselves and be confused about things, because it can feel like madness, particularly with what's going on at the moment. It feels pretty mad. Like I'm scrolling social media, which I normally do every month. It's something like, it was the wars, it was the beginning of the year. Last year, we had, there's so many different things that have gone on. I wrote about it today, but I won't go too much into it here. But I see people, we all do this. I'm not saying people projecting that it's people, because I've done it myself, where you get so hooked into a particular news story, like the Charlie Kirk thing, for instance, that went on for a couple of months. Then there was another thing where, if you're on social media, Nicole Kidman breaking up with her husband, that went on for like a certain amount of weeks. And then a new story comes up. I know that may be minor, the Nicole Kidman thing, but I saw what was going on. People were making inappropriate comments. People, were making assumptions about things, and we're doing the same thing at the moment. And we don't know why these files have been shown to us. We don't know what's real, what's not real, who said what to whom, whether it's, but clearly there is a problem there that needs to be dealt with. We know that much. And the abuse of people, it happens in wars, it happens in all walks of life, in family homes. So we need to be aware. So that, because it connects in with the mass emotion, and a lot of people are being triggered at the moment who have experienced that type of trauma in their own lives. So we need to stabilize ourselves. So Saturn also, it's music, it's films, it's the film heroes. It's quite a beautiful conjunction. And also it's a glimpse of Neptunian like moments of insight, creativity, and the shadow as well. So with this, we got Saturn Neptune is asking us to step into life rather than pull back. So we may feel with what's going on throughout the world in politics that we want to pull back and we want to hide, but actually we need to step into life rather than pull back. And also it's asking for our inner and bodily strength, confidence, Aries, yeah? So keeping our head as well, because Mars is also to do with that. So we want to check that we're not just running away with our imagination or fantasy, or getting too focused on something that we have little control over. And we can have the courage here to uncover our gifts. So self-care, self-assertion are essential. It's not selfish, like we have to take care of ourselves first and self-assert ourselves. And as we make some disciplined effort, if we can look now as this conjunction happens, where do I need to make disciplined effort? And also we're having, contact, like we've all got our own Wi-Fi signal going on internally, like our antennas. So we're in tune with the collective psyche. We can shape our lives with more freedom and purpose. So this is also a time to work with dreams. If you do dream, some people say they don't, but if you ask before you go to sleep, it's like, I want to tap into a dream. Is there something I need to know? So we can transcend our trauma, or integrate it is a better word, integrate our traumas. I do a lot of repair for myself, not on purpose. It just happens where I have a lot of dreams about early trauma, and I'm figuring out how I integrate in my sleep, and then I wake up and I'm refreshed, and I've actually dealt with something that's not been in therapy, it's been in my sleep. Yeah. So we can create things and find ways to express ourselves and our deepest visions. We can use art. Reading is really important. And personally, looking after ourselves, creativity and spirituality. So I'm going to look now. I'm going to go ahead a bit. So I'm emanate the chart. It's emanated. If I can, I have to take this off. I'm just going to show you the exact day this happens. So take that. There you go. Right, so let's making sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, so if I go, this is days. Today, by the way, sorry, I didn't say it's the 5th of February 2026. And if I go ahead and I go by days, this is the 6th. So watch here. This is the conjunction. 10, 11. We're going to 20. Touching in. 0045 it will be. There you go, just here, it's crossed over. That will be the 20th. So it's going to cross over Neptune on that day. And the moon that day will be in Aries. And we've also got Jupiter, which is still retrograde, and Pluto, so sextile and a sextile, which I will look at that on my next video, what that means. Oh, and I would say that Mercury is going to go retrograde. We can just take a look at those days. So you see it's 22, that's the 23rd of February, 24th, 25th. There you go, stations on the 25th. 26th, it's station still, then it's retrograde. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we go back to 11 degrees. I think it's going back to 8, 9. There it is, it's 8. Oh, that's very interesting. Let me see what I've just realized. Okay, so this is very interesting because that goes back to 8 degrees where the North Node is, if you look there. And the North Node in Pisces, because that will leave, this is exciting actually, the North Node will go into Aquarius in the middle of the year, I think late July. And at the moment, that North Node in Pisces is still the quest for compassion and faith. And it's also where we have a tendency where we built rigid structure and order in our lives, in our personal world, and become judgmental of others. Yeah. So, and this, blocks our understanding of our oneness with all that's around us. And it's a need to develop spiritual understanding. So the reason that's there in Neptune, we, develop our spiritual understanding and to learn to rely on our intuition. So this is an important thing that we must do. And I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm doing readings. I also do hypnosis, and my webpage is below in the link of this YouTube video. Catch you later.